to our concert today. We welcome all of you here to Our Lady of the Angels. And we welcome back this time the Federal City Brass Band. And it's been, I guess, Yari said it was 3 years, I think, since the last time they were here. And if you've ever heard this group before, it's a lot of fun. And Yari gives some great stories behind the music that they sing. So it's a very enjoyable concert. I want to tell you also they have CDs here with them if you would be interested in buying them sometime during the intermission.
And it's the music that we're playing today.
And it's the music they're playing today, just happens to be, if you really like that music. And also a reminder that we do take a free will offering up at intermission. So I will leave it now to Yari Villanueva to tell us his story.
Good afternoon and welcome to a concert by the Federal City Brass Band. And if you can tell by the uniforms we are wearing, we are a recreation of a Union regimental brass band. Bands that were seen in the Union Army at the beginning of the Civil War. And since this is the 150th anniversary years, we thought we would present a concert, but focus our concert on music that Abraham Lincoln would have heard. Abraham Lincoln, of course, being our 16th president, and tomorrow being the inauguration of our next president, we thought we'd put everything together and play music that was played for presidents. Now, the first piece that we played was a very familiar piece called the Battle Cry of Freedom. It's also known as Rally Round the Flag. A very popular tune in the North, a rallying tune as they were, because it hoped to invoke that patriotic spirit of all the young men to join up and serve their country. Now, the next selection that we're going to play for you is a piece, oh, by the way, the piece that we heard, that you just heard, would have been a piece that Abraham Lincoln would have heard hundreds of times during his presidency. The next one that we're going to play for you is a piece that would be known today as The Old Gray Mare, She Ain't What She Used to Be. Now, see, that tune's been around for such a long time. It was very popular in Lincoln's time. It was used, known by many different names, including Out of the Wilderness, Down in Alabama, and Old Joe Hooker, after the Union general. It was used in a campaign, as a campaign song by Abraham Lincoln in his first presidential campaign in 1860. The words being that old Abe Lincoln came out of the wilderness down to Illinois. So this is the tune that they would have played. And when we get to the part that sounds like Old Gray Mare, you'll probably recognize it. But we call it in our book Old Joe Hooker. heard some people singing along to that. It's really great. That's really nice. Really terrific tune back then. Now we're going to play a piece that was heard at the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln on March 4th, 1861. At that inauguration, and at every inauguration since, there's always been one common thing that's happened, and that's been a performance by the United States Marine Band. The Marine Band has played for virtually every single inauguration of presidents since they were formed back in 1803, 1804. And, of course, tomorrow, on the steps of the Capitol, it will be no different. The United States Marine Band will be there to play music for the president and to play the ruffles and flourishes as he appears for the first time. Now, in 1861, the band leader of the United States Marine Band was a fellow by the name of John Philip Sousa. No. Not quite. John Philip Sousa was around, actually. He was born in 1854, and he joins the band a little bit later. But at this time, the band was run by an Italian clarinet player by the name of Francis Scala. He was a clarinet player who had joined the Navy and had served on shipboard, but then jumped ship and came to Washington and joined the U.S. Marine Band and rose to the rank of the leader of the band. And of course, being Italian background, there was a lot of Italian music in the band, of course, and he was asked to write a special piece of music to commemorate the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln. And what he came up with was a piece called the Union March, also known as, of course, the Abraham Lincoln Inauguration March. The reason we got it is that we went to the Library of Congress and we found in their archives a piano copy of it, and written in Scala's hand, and we assumed that it was this arrangement that the Marine Band fashioned their parts from. So we were able to go and, using the stylistic arranging methods of the time, fashion arrangement for the Federal City Brass. Now, in the music, what I found, which was kind of interesting, was halfway through were the words "Hurrah for the Union" that were penciled into the music. So I would assume that as the band would play, they would stop and then they would shout, "Hurrah for the Union!" Something like that. Now, keeping with that practice, we're going to have to do that today, of course. And so I'm going to ask you to join us with "Hurrah for the Union." So we got to practice it, of course, okay? So here we go. Ready? And I'll turn around and I'll cue it. Hurrah for the Union! Now, we've got to do it a little louder for the folks in Washington to hear it, okay? Once again, here we go. Hurrah for the Union! Oh, beautiful. This is the inauguration or march for Abraham Lincoln, written by Francis Scala, March 4th, 1861. Our next tune doesn't have quite an American-sounding name. It's called Viva la America. And it was a piece that was played a lot in the presence of Abraham Lincoln. In fact, there is a documentation in a newspaper that when Lincoln visited the Navy Yard, the Dodworth Band was performing and that they played this piece. It's a delightful little piece, and it gives you an idea of what a quick step sounded like. Now, a quick step in military music at the time is basically a march. Quick steps were used by bands to help keep troops marching in step. So this is called Viva la America Quick Step, originally performed by the Dodworth Band. Well, during the war, especially at the beginning, many poems, many songs were written to help inspire patriotism, to try and get, of course, people to sign up to fight for the Union. There's a great little tune called "We Are Coming, Father Abram," and this was in response. It was written by a Quaker abolitionist by the name of James Sloan Gibbons, and it was written in response to Abraham Lincoln's a call for 300,000 troops in 1862. Once these lyrics were written, many composers seized upon those and wrote many melodies to it. Stephen Foster wrote one, actually, called, appropriately enough, We're Coming Father Abram, but the one that we're going to actually play for you today was written by another composer, this one, Luther O. Emerson. And this arrangement was played by the William Withers Band. Now, William Withers, and we're going to come back to him in a little bit later, was a band leader who was in the Washington area during the Civil War. He had started off in a regimental band, but had come back to Washington and formed a band of his own that played at many parties that Lincoln attended. We'll come back and visit Mr. Withers in just a bit. Meanwhile, we're going to play a setting of We're Coming Father Abram, 300,000 strong. Abraham Lincoln was, of course, a very sentimental fella, and he enjoyed music a lot. He enjoyed going to plays, he loved Shakespeare, and he always had a fondness for stories and sad little songs. When he visited Antietam after the battle in late September of 1862, out, of course, Antietam, Maryland, he was accompanied by his good friend, Ward Hill Lamon. And Lamon was not only his good friend, but he was also his bodyguard at times, and basically took care, he was his body man, basically took care of the president. Walking over the fields of Antietam after the battle must have been quite depressing, of course, for the president to see such carnage. And he even asked his good friend to tell him a few jokes to try and cheer him up, which Ward did. Unfortunately, the press caught hold of this with the president chuckling at Antietam, and they wrote just awful articles about how dare the president, be in such a happy mood after, such a sad battle. Even back then, the newspapers would go after politicians quite a lot. Well, the president also asked his friend to sing him a sad little song that he had known for many, many years. And it's a tune called 20 Years Ago. And we'd like to play that for you right now. It's a very sentimental song. And I'm sure that it probably evokes such sad moments and wonderful moments from a time long ago for the president. now we want to sort of recognize Abraham Lincoln's fun-loving side, okay? You know, he was an athlete. He spent all those years chopping wood. He was a very strong man that even when you look at the pictures of him in his presidency, looking at his hands, they're very, very strong hands. And we know that he had an enjoyment of outdoor sports, and some of his biographers cite Lincoln as having played something that was called town ball. Now, town ball, of course, is baseball. Baseball was around during the Civil War. There were actually professional teams that were playing in Washington. At least 2 professional baseball games were played on the ellipse near the White House during his presidency, although we do not know for sure if Lincoln had attended any one of those games. But baseball was certainly popular during the period, and it also appeared in many political cartoons of the time. Now, many pieces were written at this time commemorating the national game. And we'd like to play one for you right now called the Home Run Gallop. Now, everybody knows what a home run is, of course, but a gallop is a form of dance. It's a very, very quick dance. And these pieces are usually short because you can only dance very quickly for only a short period of time before you fall over. But if you ever go to a military ball, besides having marches and waltzes and schottisches, you also had what were called these gallops. So here we go with a salute to Abraham Lincoln's fun side called the Home Run Gallop. Always see those guys running down the first base line. I'll tell you, it's so much fun. You know, when you sit and you hear this music from that time, what's great about it, especially in a place like this, you're hearing music played on original instruments. We're playing original music, and so we're being transported back to that time, which is really terrific. And we're going to talk a little bit about all these various types of instruments that you see up here in just a bit. But before we do that, we're going to play a piece written by a fellow by the name of William Withers. We're coming back to that name again. And it's not so much a composition, but more a medley that he put together. William Withers, as I mentioned before, was a band leader, had first started with a regimental brass band, had been at Bull Run with this band, had come back to Washington, and then basically stayed there during the war, leading his own civilian band. Bands were in quite high demand during the Civil War, and there certainly was lots of music in Washington. Not only did you have the civilian groups that would play for social affairs like picnics and parties and balls, but you had the many regimental bands that came through, especially in the early part of 1861. Because every regiment that was called into federal service had their own band, if you can imagine that. Every regiment came with a 15 or 16-piece brass band. So in April of 1861, literally hundreds of bands throughout Washington playing all at the same time. Well, of course, and it was by regulation. They were authorized to have these bands. Well, the U.S. government, in a way to cut their budget, of course, and of course we're seeing that today, decided that there just was too much music in the Army. So in 1862, July of 1862, they cut 1/3 of the music program in the United States Army. Every two out of 3 bands had to disband. They had to go home or pick up a musket. Well, it was very interesting how they sort of got around this. While they had a lot of bands that would stay, some of the bands that were mustered out came back as soldiers who would, by wink and a nod, would play their instruments instead of playing their rifles. So a lot of the bands still had a lot of music that went on through the rest of the war. Now, back to William Withers. This next piece we're going to play for you is actually a medley that he put together, which includes 3 of popular Civil War tunes. The Battle Cry of Freedom, also known as Rally Round the Flag. It's the piece that you heard before. And the other tunes are called When This Cruel War Is Over, also known as Weeping, Sad, and Lonely, and also Grafted into the Army. Okay, another word for being conscripted or drafted into the Army. And he entitled this the Freedom Quickstep. before we take a short intermission, we're going to play one last piece. And this piece is kind of interesting in that the United States at the time had no national anthem. We think today, of course, of the Star-Spangled Banner. That is our national anthem. Star-Spangled Banner was a tune that was played a lot during the Civil War. It was considered a patriotic song. But there were other very patriotic songs also. There was Hail Columbia. There was Yankee Doodle, of course. And these were considered also our national anthem, as it were. But when you played that song, one would think, oh, that song is associated with the United States. Another song that was very much associated and was in the running for our national anthem was a tune called Red, White, and Blue, which is also known as Hail Columbia. Is that right? Yeah, Hail Columbia. No. Columbia, Gem of the Ocean. I knew there was a Columbia in there. I'm glad we have a musicologist in attendance today. Thank you, ma'am. Columbia, Gem of the Ocean. And that's a tune we'd like to play for you right now, but it's under the title of Red, White, and Blue. After which we're going to take just a brief intermission so we can do our offering, and then when we come back, just 5 minutes, because we have lots of music, we got the whole rest of the war to get through, we'll also talk about these instruments and the uniforms that we're wearing and all that good stuff. So here we go with Red, White, and Blue.